Father, Arius? Is the argument we agree with the Father's interpretation only in as much as the Fathers agree with apostolic tradition? And if so, that leads to the second obvious question. How do we know exactly what constitutes apostolic tradition? Okay, so I devote a large significant portion of the book, Thinking Orthodox, to the question of who are the Fathers. So maybe you don't remember reading that, Eric, but it's there. But I'm going to answer you anyhow, okay? So first of all, he asked, they didn't agree on everything, did they? Well, it depends on what you mean by that. They agreed on everything having to do with morals and doctrine. Okay, they did agree. If they didn't agree, they're not a father. Okay, so what makes somebody a father of the church, I know for certain, I discussed that in the book, Thinking Orthodox. How is somebody considered a father of the church? It's not just because they wrote a long time ago or because they were a cleric. Some of them were not clerics. And some of them are more recent. We have fathers of the church from the 20th century. St. John of Kronstadt is the most obvious example, I think. So there are certain qualifications for someone to be considered a father of the church. They don't agree on everything. If you're talking about interpretation, like let's say the Lord's Prayer. We have several fathers who talk about the meaning of the Lord's Prayer. So some of them will find things or draw out some interpretations that the others don't have. That doesn't mean they disagree, because the Bible has many layers of meaning. As long as they don't say something that is incorrect doctrinally or in terms of the dogma of the church or the morals of the church, they can have those different insights. They are different people. So we wouldn't need all of these fathers if they said exactly the same thing all the time. But they present it differently depending upon the era in which they are living, the heresy they're responding to, whether they're a monk or a parish priest, whether they are speaking to monks or to people in the world. So they present their ideas differently. But that doesn't mean they don't agree. There is a consensus of the fathers. And this is what we teach as Orthodox Christians. This is how we interpret the scriptures. Now, unfortunately, because we live in a non-Orthodox country and we are influenced by Western thought, there are a number of Orthodox so-called scholars or even Bible scholars who are not following this tradition. And that means they are not Orthodox. And it doesn't matter whether they call themselves Orthodox or even if they're an Orthodox priest. I'm kind of dismayed lately to see this happening. And instead, they're following their own ideas. They think they've discovered something new, or they're following their own analysis. And you know what? If as a scholar, let's say you're a professor, you want to write something and say, I've come to this conclusion and it differs from the fathers, at least say so. At least say, well, what I'm saying here is not according to the fathers of the church.
Okay, plugged it back in. It was there.
So, it's unfortunately, however, we don't really have, well, I shouldn't say we don't have the freedom. Yes, you have the freedom to say whatever you want, all right? But that's not helpful, and it's not Orthodox, and it erodes the Orthodox faith. The reason why the fathers are fathers is that they continuously followed the teachings of those who came before them. So I would say to an Orthodox so-called scholar or scripture scholar, where did you get that from the fathers? Now, that doesn't mean that we are restricted or limited to only saying something that a father said. In other words, we can only quote the fathers. I don't believe that either. As a matter of fact, the very, I think, second or third podcast I ever did on Ancient Faith Radio, going back to 2008, is about what does it mean that we interpret the Bible according to the fathers. What does that mean? That is on Search the Scriptures, the original, not the live version. You could find that at orthodoxbiblestudy.info. What does it mean? This was my introduction to the Bible. After introducing myself, the next lesson was about what does it mean to interpret the Bible according to the Scriptures. Now, there are people, even people who are Orthodox, who think that they're smarter, they want to show off, that they've come to some brilliant insight or something, and that this is what they're teaching. And that's not orthodox. And we as Orthodox Christians should resist that, because it erodes the Orthodox faith. When a person who is openly Orthodox, and especially when they're speaking on a forum that's supported by the church, or as a priest in a sermon or something, is saying something that is really a deviation from the tradition of the church, we, the faithful, should call them out on that and say, where are you getting that from? So, now what did I say? I said you do not have to simply resign yourself to quoting the fathers. No. But you have to have the mind of the fathers. What you're saying has to reflect their approach. And when someone simply uses his own imagination,